What are some of the qualities and characteristics required of a true Jewish leader?
The very first mention of Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah is, of course, when he is still a baby. But once he grows up, as we read in the Pasuk in Perek Beth, Pasuk Yod Aleph, chapter 2, verse 11, we read as follows: Vayihi bayamim hahem, it came to pass at that time, Vayichdal Moshe, he is now a grown man, or at least a fairly mature youth, Vayaseh al eho, and he went out literally to his brethren. Vayar b'sivlotham, and he saw their sufferings. Vayar ish Misri, and he saw an Egyptian man, apparently a taskmaster, Makah ish Ivri me'eho, striking one of his Jewish brethren. The first thing to note is that the Torah is not relating to us that Moshe Rabbeinu went out for a walk to see what he might see. Rather, Moshe is described as going out, Vayeseh el eho, he went out to his brethren. What does that mean? In other words, he went out with a very deliberate purpose in mind. He wished to see for himself, to experience what was happening to his brethren. He knew that he was a Jew. He had obviously been informed of this in the palace where he had been brought up. It also seems that he was raised, at least for a time, by his own parents, because his sister Miriam had spoken to the daughter of Paro, and she had given over the baby that she had found to the mother, without knowing perhaps that it was the mother, to nurse this child and probably to bring it up, therefore, at least for a couple of years, if not more. He knew he was Jewish, and he knew that he was part of this people that was subjugated and enslaved. And he went out, Vayeseh el eho, he went out to see those people, his people. Vayar b'sivlotham, and he saw, and obviously was very moved by their sufferings, even though he himself was not suffering in the least. He was privileged. He had everything he could possibly want or need. He could have simply turned a blind eye, but of course he could not. And this is precisely the main and the most obvious reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was chosen by Hashem to be the Jewish people's leader, because he was that kind of person who could not turn away from his people. He could not ignore what he knew to be true, nor could he suffer an injustice, as we will presently see. And he saw one of his fellow Jews being beaten. The Torah continues, Va'ifan ko wacho. Moshe looked this way and that. Vayar ki en ish, and he saw that he was unobserved. Vayach et ha-Misri, and he struck and killed the Misri. Vayitmnehu bahol, and buried him in the sand, hid him. This, of course, in the eyes of the Egyptians, in the eyes of Paro, the king, and every Egyptian official, in the eyes of the law, this was a criminal act. He was a murderer, and he was siding with those who were apparently considered, rightly or wrongly, to be enemies of the Egyptians. And Moshe clearly knew this, which is why he looked and was circumspect, wished to see if he was being observed or not. And then the Torah goes on to relate, Vayeseh bayom hasheni, the following day, V'hineh sheneh anoshim ivrim nisim, two Jewish men were involved in some argument. Vayomer lo rasha, Moshe saw what was going on, and he said to that individual that he judged to be in the wrong, Lama thakeh re'acha, why do you strike your fellow Jew? In other words, again, he saw an injustice, and he could not remain silent. The Jew who had been striking his fellow Jew, the one that Moshe judged to be in the wrong, responded to Moshe, "Vayomer mi samecha leish sar v'shofet alenu." Who appointed you a judge and an adjudicator over us? "Halahorgeni ata omer." Do you intend to kill me? "Ka'asher harakta et hamisri," as you killed the Egyptian yesterday. At this point, Moshe realized that he had been observed. "Vayira Moshe vayomar," and Moshe was greatly afeared. "Achen noda' hadavar." The fact, the action of yesterday is known, and therefore he also assumed it would become more widely known. "Vayishma' Paro," as it did, in fact, turn out to be the case. "Vayishma' Paro eventually heard et hadavar hazeh, about this. "Vayivakesh laharoget Moshe," and he wished to apprehend and put Moshe to death. "Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro," Moshe had to flee Misraim, Egypt. "Vayeshev be'eretz Midian," and he fled to Midian, a fair way away across the desert. "Vayeshev al ha'be'er," and he settled down next to a well. Midian is a dry desert country. Water is the most essential commodity, and therefore rivalries over the water supply were a common facet of life in that part of the world. The Torah continues, "Ulchohen Midian sheva banoth." The high priest of Midian had 7 daughters who tended his flocks. He was a wealthy and important man, and his daughters, as was common, were the shepherds. Apparently had no sons. "Watavona, watidlana, watamallana at harahatim." His daughters came to the well and filled up the drinking troughs, lahashkoth son avihan, so that the flocks, their father's flocks, could drink. "Vayavo haru'im vayagharashum," and other shepherds, men, who could, by way of threat and violence, prevail over these daughters of this important man of Midian, came along these shepherds, "Vayavo haru'im vayagharashum," and drove them off, they and their flocks. "Vayakom Moshe vayoshi'an." Moshe saw all of this. He saw the injustice. He saw the thuggery and the improper and immoral behavior of these shepherds. And again, he could not turn a blind eye. "Vayashqet sonam," and he saved these daughters of this priest, of this man, from these other shepherds. And he even went on to water their flocks. Again, it is obvious that Moshe took a great risk, just as he had in the case of the Egyptian taskmaster. Moshe took a great risk. He was one person, so it seems from the context, against a number of shepherds, a number of people who could have ganged up against him, who could have beaten him, perhaps even killed him. He risked all by standing up for what was right, at great risk to himself. And this was therefore quite an outstanding event. And the daughters returned home after having finished their work with the flocks. "Watavono el Ru'el avihan." They came to their father, here called Ru'el, elsewhere called Yithro. "Vayomer," and he said to them, "Madua miharten bo hayom." Why have you come home earlier than expected? "Vatomarna," and they responded, "Ish Misri," an Egyptian man, "Hitzilanu miyad horaim," saved us and stood up for us, defended us from these other shepherds who had driven us off and who had intended to appropriate our water. And he also drew water for us. And he helped us to water the flocks. And Ru'el, Yithro, the father, said to his daughters, Vayomer al benotho wa'ayo. And where is he? Why did you not bring him here? This was, after all, quite a remarkable story. And it spoke very well of this individual, this Egyptian. And it seems that he had already decided that if possible, he would take this Egyptian man and make him his son-in-law. So it seems from what we're about to read. He said to them, Lama za'azavtena ta'ish. Why did you leave him back there at the well? Qira'an lo. Call him, invite him here. Wayochal lahem, that he may break bread with us. Wayo'al Moshe lo shabath at ha'ish. And Moshe apparently did come and did break bread with them and decided to live with or under the auspices of this important man, Yithro, Re'oel. وَيِتَنَثْ سِپُرَا vitola Moshe, and he was given the daughter, Sipora, one of his daughters, as a wife. And then we hear about the first child of Moshe Rabbeinu being born. وَتَلَثْ ben, she gave birth to a boy, وَيِكْرَأَثْ Shemot Gerashom, who was called Gerashom, Ki Amar Moshe, called him by this name. He said, Ger Ha'ithi, because I am a stranger, a foreigner, Be'eretz Nochriya, in a strange land. In very few Pesukim, what we see here clearly is that the Torah is painting a very clear and unmistakable picture with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu's character. What was unique, what was different, what was special about Moshe Rabbeinu? He was perfectly able to deny what he saw with his own eyes in Egypt. He could simply have turned away. He himself had nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. He had a comfortable life and no doubt great success awaited him. And nevertheless, he chose to do that which guaranteed that he would lose all of that, because he could not bear to see iniquity and injustice without doing something about it. And we are reminded at this point of the pasuk, the verse in Genesis, in Sefer Bereshith, Perek Yud Het, chapter 18, pasuk Yod Teth, verse 19. Hashem speaks about, refers to Avraham, Avinu, Abraham. Ki yadartiu, I know him. Lema'ana she'issa wa'ath bano wa'ath beitho aharo. He will instruct and teach, educate his household, his descendants, and they will be a special type of people. V'shamaru derech Adonai. They will keep the way of Hashem, my way. They will follow in the path of Hashem. That is to say, to seek justice. La'asoth sadaqah u'mishpat, to do that which is right and correct. Lema'an havi Adonai al Avraham, so that I, Hashem, will be able to bring and bestow upon Avraham eth asher diber alo, that which has been said about him. We see that Moshe is truly a follower, a true descendant of Avraham Avinu, and someone who inherited his legacy. And this, therefore, is the first quality required of a true Jewish leader. That he identifies with the people, with his people. He does not see himself separate or above them, but rather one of them. As we read, وَيَسَىٰ أَلَهَوْ, he went out to see his brethren, he identified with his brethren, and he could not ignore what was happening to them. So he has to have a true care and concern for his people. Second of all, he has to be someone who cannot bear iniquity, injustice, and remain silent. And thirdly, he's even willing to risk his life and everything that he has and everything that he can expect to enjoy in the future. He is willing to risk all of that because of that moral imperative. These are the first qualities, the most outstanding, the most essential, and the most fundamental characteristics of a true Jewish leader. It is clear that the Torah emphasizes all of these events, all of these facts, in order to paint this very precise picture of Moshe Rabbeinu, the man who goes out to see his brethren, their suffering, the man who cannot witness what he sees and do nothing, the person who risks his life where injustice and a matter of principle is concerned. And not just in Egypt, but even in Midian, when he goes to Midian, when he sees the shepherds behaving in such an immoral and barbarous fashion towards the daughters of Yitro, again, he stands up for them, at risk to himself. We see repeatedly, Moshe Rabbeinu is a man of great moral fortitude, a person who will not bend, a person for whom principle is above everything, including self-interest, a person who cares for others and risks all. These are the most essential, the most fundamental requirements and characteristics of a true Jewish leader.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.